Everyone was like, wait, so you're representing Naomi Campbell, but now you're quitting your job? Why? My father was like, can you please explain? You're quitting your job? And I said, because I'm not happy, Dad. That's why. I had this whole epiphany in therapy that it literally did not matter what hand I was dealt. I could be like, I want a new deck. In fact, I'm making up my own game. I could no longer deny that the only thing I cared about was the mental health of my clients. And I realized I don't give a shit about the Pantene deal. I don't care about the movie deal that I'm supposed to be negotiating, because I actually became an expert at what happens to you when you become famous. Because that's a very specific niche where people think fame is amazing and nobody wants to hear any famous people complaining about it. There's a very specific psychological experience and a hyper self-consciousness that can come along with this life of fame. And it used to be only super famous people like in the movies would have this. And now, of course, with social media and with influencers, hello, anyone can have this experience.
I don't think people are supposed to have this experience. I don't think that we're equipped necessarily to deal with the judgments and the opinions of people, feedback daily, being inundated with it.
When you talk about any kind of codependency, people see this weakness or this person who's dependent on other people. That's really not it. It's taking on too much. And what is the cost?
So welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. You have really good glass skin. Sorry. I just have to point this out because you're sitting across from me. Your skin is amazing. It's so glossy. Very glassy, like the whole, what is your skincare routine? I just need to know.
It's not good.
No?
Except I do stay out of the sun and have for many, many years.
Yeah, I can tell.
I do not like the sun. It does not like me. Everyone, also for young people, whatever you're putting on your face for sun, put on your hands as well. Because and your chest, because that shit ages so fast, where you're like, this can look great. And then you're like, and my hands look like an old lady's, Not mine, because I've been doing it for years. Never go to bed with makeup on, obviously. Like really basic stuff. I really do Neutrogena cleaning stuff I use. And the makeup I use is, what's it called? Not the makeup, the cream is La Roche-Posay, I think it's called, which is a fancy way of it's probably like an American brand that just pretends they're not. But anyway, inexpensive and great, and I love it.
I'm influenced because you look amazing. I would love to talk about your trajectory into doing what you do now, because you used to be a talent agent. You were saying before that you worked with supermodels, celebrities. We were both kind of on the party scene. So I would love to start there just for context. I
was a talent agent before I became a psychotherapist. And part of why I left that world is that I was also deeply into therapy myself. I'd gotten into recovery young. I stopped drinking when I was 21. So to have eyes wide open at that early age of life, you're like, wow. I realized how I had no skills whatsoever because I had been numbing the feelings. And now suddenly I was feeling everything. But I loved it. And once I found therapy, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, does everyone know about therapy? Why isn't everyone doing it? The mind-blowing part to me when I stopped drinking is I realized most people think about life and you feel like, oh, you got dealt a hand of cards from the family of origin that you're born into, your societal situation, money situation. And I had this total epiphany in therapy that it literally did not matter what hand I was dealt. I could be like, I want a new hand. I want a new deck. In fact, I'm making up my own game. And that's exactly what happened. I was like, being sober, I could see this very distinctly. So to the right was 10 years, not being sober. What would that look like? And I feel like eventually I probably would have gotten sober older, but it would have been a decade of bullshit. You know what I mean? Just bad decisions and regrets and feeling terrible about myself. And then to the left, it was like if I looked at that fence, it was just like this clean slate. It was like nothing. And I was like, oh, I could actually just create the life that I want. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't know anyone in entertainment. Obviously, I didn't go to school for it because nobody can. There's not even a thing, right? And I was like, I'm going to be a talent agent. And I found my way to do that. Did it for a bunch of years. Loved it. But then I got too healthy to stay. I was like, this is toxic. I need to get out. I couldn't be a part of the problem, especially because in the last couple of years of my career, I was representing models. And I was like, I'm definitely part of the problem by being here. And I actually had a niece. One of my nieces was very young at the time, and she had a weight thing. And I was like, what am I telling her, this kid that I love more than anything in the world, that she's not worthy because she's not skinny? Like I had a whole come to Jesus about it myself. And I decided to just literally quit my fat job. Nobody got it. Everyone was like, wait, so you're representing Naomi Campbell, but now you're quitting your job? Why? My father was like, can please explain? You're quitting your job. You're at the height of because I was running a bi-coastal talent agency. I was running the New York office of this talent agency. And he's like, why would you do that? And I said, because I'm not happy, Dad. That's why. And he was like, sounds weird. I was like, good thing I don't need anything from you. Thanks for the support. I was like, I'll take out loans. I'm good. And that was why I switched, was I just really I didn't feel fulfilled. And it wasn't that when I was doing it, I loved it. And when I really started not loving it is when I was like, you need another plan. And I knew it. Once I took one class at NYU, non-matriculating, just to see like, how would it be? And it was abnormal psych. And I fucking loved it so much. I was like, oh yeah, this forever. I want to do this forever. And listen, I always did well in school. But I was never like scholarly. I went to a crappy undergraduate school. So it wasn't like I was so into higher education. But going to school, just learning about the mind and relationships, and it was just blew my mind. I was so happy. And that was literally, I've been a therapist for 27 years.
Wow. Amazing. I was going to ask you if you were interested in therapy as a result of your own experience or being in that toxic situation and seeing it in other people and having this desire to learn more about it and help. Is that what inspired that?
Great question, because the truth is it was both. I was certainly inspired by how amazing it was that I felt like I could change my own life. But what was happening, the reason I left, what really was my pivot moment, is that I could no longer deny that the only thing I cared about was the mental health of my clients. I was getting everyone into drug treatment clinics, eating disorder clinics. I was telling everyone to go to therapy, like actually. And I realized I don't give a shit about the Pantene deal. I don't care about the movie deal that I'm supposed to be negotiating with this person. I mean, I'll do it. But I was like, you're going to start doing this badly. Like, you need to just take the leap, even though it was scary, because you're literally going from making a ton of money to making zero money, no dollars. And I thought to myself, can you do that? And I was like, you know what? The money was, and I never really lived any kind of an opulent lifestyle. I traveled a lot. I did what I wanted, right? And I still do. But, I did what I wanted with my money. And I was like, money never really made me happy. Being fulfilled, doing something that hours go by and you know what I mean? The time flies and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been in sessions all day, but not caring because you're so enthralled with what you're doing. That's what I wanted. And that's what I got. And then it turned into this and writing and speaking. And now I do much more, I have some high profile clients because I actually became an expert at what happens to you when you become famous, because that's a very specific niche where people think fame is amazing unless you're famous, and then and nobody wants to hear any famous people complaining about shit, obviously. But there's a very specific psychological experience, and you know this yourself because you're visible enough to know of what happens. There's like a hyper self-consciousness that can come along with this life of fame, of any level of fame. And it used to be only super famous people like in the movies would have this. And now, of course, with social media and with influencers, and anyone can have this experience.
There's a lot there. One, I think that being sober, you kind of have this unique perspective where I don't know if this is how you felt, but I feel sometimes like I'm too sober for this. And so I exit things sooner than I might have had I not been sober, which is good and bad. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do the right thing here, and we just can't do that. But
it's also boring. Yeah. Here's the thing. When you're sober, people are boring. Yeah. It's not interesting hearing you talk about the same story or exaggerate or whatever you're talking about right now. You're not going to remember, and I might not be able to forget. So I protect my peace at all costs. Everyone knows the second I got sober, I was always pretty self-determined, but I always drive wherever I'm going. And the second I need to leave, I fucking leave. I don't care. My friends want to stay? Great. And they'll be like, oh, she's got to leave. She does have to leave. And why the fuck do you care? Stay all night. I don't care. But when I got to go, I got to go. And I think being sober, I agree with you. Sort of, I'm too sober for this, but your eyes are wide open. And my feeling, when you have good boundaries, right? My first book was all about boundaries. You realize, I know that when I need to leave a place, that's my side of the street. I'm not doing anything bad to my friend who wants me to stay. When it's in my highest and best to leave, that's when I leave. And if it's a good friend, all my good friends are like, go babe, see ya, call me tomorrow. Like, nobody is trying to make me stay when I need to leave.
The other piece of that, I mean, this could be a whole different conversation, but the piece about just the unique experience of being a public facing person. And I'm sure you get it a little bit too, because now you're public facing and you're like an icon in your industry and you have a following on social media and all of that.
I do.
And yeah, I don't think anybody wants to hear that it comes with its own set of problems. And I always say, like, I experience it on such a minuscule level compared to like real celebrities. And even on the level that I experience it, I sometimes feel like I don't think people are supposed to like have this experience necessarily. I don't think that we're equipped necessarily to deal with the judgments and the opinions of people, feedback daily, being inundated with it. And I remember, I always bring up this example, but I heard a speaker once saying, like, I think she was a teacher. She went in for a review. The critique was difficult to hear. Somebody said something mean, and she talked about how that stuck with her for so long. And I was like, yeah. And people, whether they're celebrities, public figures, whatever, like, deal with that daily, an influx of it daily. And it's like, suddenly you have to have the coping skills to deal with it that I don't think anybody innately has.
And it's not natural for us, because when you think about the way we've been socialized, you have all of these keyboard warriors, or these people who I like to say have cyber balls, because they would literally never have the courage to say that to your face, like it would never be. And so it kept us in order socially, because if you were going to break up with Sally, Bob, you needed to do it in some decent way, because you were going to see her at church and you were going to see her somewhere else. We're so disconnected in a way that the humanity of it all, it gets lost in people wanting to feel powerful, or people taking, it's a lot of displaced aggression on the internet, for sure.
Yeah.
But I also think that anyone who has any kind of a following, your job is to protect yourself. You can't believe all the good and you can't believe all the bad, right? My feeling is, I love the celebrities who are not on social media at all, who are like, that.
The dream.
Yeah. If it's not part of their business model,
it's
right?
a luxury
and they don't have to.
Yeah.
Yes. And for many of us, it's literally like a line item on your business. Like it's something, it's a way to interact with people. But I also keep my community pretty tight in respect to, people think this shit is a democracy. You know what, man? Anything I put out on social media, that shit is free.
Yeah.
And it is a benevolent dictatorship, is what I say by me. Where if I don't like you, I block you immediately. I don't need to. I will delete what you wrote. I don't need your permission.
Yeah.
Because it's free. So I don't really feel like I owe you anything, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, people can disagree with me, of course, but I'm talking about people who are just stirrers, people who are just looking to say something mean or provocative to like get your attention. She wrote a book. I heard her on Glennon Doyle's podcast, and she was talking about that there are people who are conflict entrepreneurs, where they just can live for it, just get off on it, and to be very aware of the people in your life, that if you have people who are doing that. And then she describes it. Oh God, I wish this is what happens when you're not 25. My memory sucks. But anyway, you guys, she is a woman who writes about conflict. And she was talking about when she was at the New York Times, and that she worked with someone. And if, let's say, a really important piece that she did got killed, she'd have someone in her office, she was describing the person, who would come into her office and close the door and say, I heard your piece got killed. And she's like, yeah, I'm so bummed. And she's like, do you think it's because you're a woman?
Oh, God.
Right? And she's like, I didn't till you just said that. Thanks.
Yeah.
So interesting for us to all keep our eyes on who is stirring the pot where, personally or professionally or social media wise, and to really not get sucked into that trap. Like, let them, as Mel Robbins would say, let them. Let them do what they're doing. You don't need to respond or reply. I'll have people who you feel like they intentionally are misunderstanding what you're saying. They're like, oh, so you're saying all men are assholes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely what I was saying.
It's the culture. It's people are so combative. And I think to your point, I always say, I think people get a dopamine hit or something from feeling morally superior for that millisecond. And then they go on to the next video. And that's important to remember. I'm trying to think how to segue into codependency. I mean, I guess people pleasing is a little bit common in this scenario. And
you could be codependent with your fans and with your audience if you were unduly influenced, and if you are twisting yourself up in like a pretzel and lighting yourself on fire to keep them warm, right? To make sure that they're happy. So really, with high functioning codependency, which is what this new book is about, it's called Too Much. I wrote this because I saw this thousands of times, and it was eerily familiar, this whole behavior, which I'll describe, but because it was my own flavor of codependency. So the reason I had to come up with this, I coined this phrase, is because I have all of these baller women, boss women, CFOs, CEOs, just crushing it in life. So if I would say to them, oh, hey, what you're describing, that is a codependent behavioral pattern, they'd be like, wrong. You are incorrect, lady. You don't know what you're talking about. They're like, not me, because I'm making all the moves. I'm making all the decisions. I'm making all the money. How could I possibly be codependent? So they're thinking of the Melody Beattie codependent no more. You've got to be enabling an alcoholic to be a codependent.
I do love that book. I do a reading every morning.
Oh, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally the seminal text on codependency. And what I wrote adds to it for modern women, because things have changed and because you don't have to be involved with an addict to be codependent. And as soon as I added high functioning to that definition, not to quote Taylor, but all my clients were like, me, I'm the problem, it's me, without shame, right? They were like, that literally is me, and I'm exhausted. So why does it matter, right? Why did I expand this definition? Because the only way I can help my clients is if they could see themselves in the problem. So when they really thought the problem was everyone else, how am I walking them to a solution or helping them find their own solution? I couldn't. And so the work became so much more effective once they were like, oh my gosh, that is me. And I don't want to be that way. So let's just identify the definition of high functioning codependency. It's when you are overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the situation, the circumstances, the finances, the careers of the people in your life, to the detriment of your own internal peace. And I say that specifically because all of us are lovers. We're all empaths. We're all, highly sensitive people. Obviously, we care about the people in our lives. But when you're an HFC, you care too much, meaning you care to the point of taking responsibility for what other people are doing or how they're feeling, which of course is unhealthy.
I had this epiphany a little bit a few months ago in therapy because I felt like I was overextending myself in a lot of areas in my business, trying new things. And my therapist was kind of like, you're putting the customer first. And I think that sometimes you have to do that to have a business. But he was like explaining it as, a three-legged stool. And he's like, there's you and there's the customer or the whatever, and or the product, and then there's like the money. And when those things are out of balance, if you're putting just the money and just the customer at the expense of yourself, it's the three-legged stool, it's going to topple over. And I'm sure the same would apply to your point and relationships and wherever we tend to put the most weight, essentially.
Yes. And let's look at what is the cost. Well, let's look at the traits first. You feel overly responsible for other people. You are an overgiver. You're an overfunctioner, meaning you go above and beyond. A lot of times people didn't even ask you to do the thing, but you're doing it. You might also be hyper independent, where it's really hard for you to ask other people to do things for you, hard to receive. What are the other traits that we have? Oh, we can't stop giving you advice. We can't. We have so many good ideas, and we really want to make sure that you understand what we're saying. So auto advice giving, auto accommodating, where if something is happening and there's a problem, immediately you'll be like, it's fine. I'll get an Uber. You take the car. Like we really want peace. We want peace in the bedroom and peace in the backyard and peace in the valley and peace everywhere. But so much of the time we create that at the expense of our own peace. So those are some of the traits and the behaviors, and I get a lot of pushback online, not a lot, but all right, a decent amount of people saying, Maybe I'm just nice, Terri. Ever think about that? Maybe I'm just being kind. I'm like, here's the thing. If you can't not do it, it's a compulsion. You are not being kind. That person's discomfort is making you uncomfortable. So you want to fix that so you can be comfortable. I mean, that's the truth. At its base, when we talk about any kind of codependency, it's an overt or covert bid or attempt to control someone else's outcome. And I really feel like we don't talk about that enough when it comes to codependency. People see this weakness or this person who's dependent on other people. That's at least not with high functioning codependency. That's really not it. It's taking on too much. And what is the cost? Exactly what your therapist said, right? You're out of balance. So there's that. But also, you're bitter. You become a martyr. And you don't think that 65-year-old women who are martyrs, right? Everyone knows one. You don't think when they were 25, they were like, can't wait to grow up and become a martyr. Gonna be amazing. They did not think that, right? Nobody wants that. But that is the end result if you continue this overgiving, because there's a certain level of self-sacrificing, self-abandonment. And when you think about why are we like this?
That was my next question. Why?
Yes.
Why do we care about other people's outcomes?
I mean, listen, most of us were raised and praised. Did you have anyone being like, be a good girl? Most people did. Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So nobody taught us to be like, how do you really feel, Arielle? I'm very interested in you asserting yourself. No, it was like, be good, get good grades, be a good girl, be nice. You want people, we really cared that people thought about us as nice. So then you have the societal pressure of what it means to be a good woman. All the same stuff. So much self-sacrificing. Think about when someone will say to you, oh my God, you would love her. She would give anyone the shirt off her back. Keep your fucking shirt on, Betty. Like, why are you stripping for anybody? I'm just curious. And why is that celebrated? As opposed to be discerning. Like, sure, I'd do anything for a whole handful of VIPs in my life, but not anybody, because that doesn't make sense. And that's like people pleasing for the world. That's like making sure everyone else is comfortable. Right? That we don't make anybody uncomfortable. But that ultimately is going to be very uncomfortable for you. And what it creates, what I've seen over the many years of being a therapist, is that there's a glass ceiling of your own making when you're an HFC, a high functioning codependent. Because a lot of times we're like taking one for the team, saying yes when we really want to say no because we want to avoid conflict.
Avoid rejection.
Yes, avoid a hard conversation. And what happens is your relationships will only be so intimate. There's a glass ceiling there, but also success-wise. And you will only enjoy it so much. I was interviewed by Carolyn Hobby the other day on her show, and she was like, Terri, I'm such an HFC. I didn't have a fucking wedding. I literally eloped because I was too worried about who would be having a good time or not having a good time at my wedding. She's like, I'm literally the ultimate HFC. But again, maybe it was her dream to have a beautiful wedding, but her worry about other people having a good time made her not do that. So we really have to think about how self-sacrificing we may be to quote unquote, keep the peace. And I think we have to look at, and you can ask yourself, like if you're in the book, I talk about this concept of self-consideration, and it's like different than self-care and different than self-love. Because again, self-care, feels like maybe I'm getting a massage, or maybe I'm going to SoulCycle, or maybe, I don't know, whatever people do nowadays, right? Maybe I'm drinking green juice. With self-consideration, I want you to ask yourself these two questions. Anybody watching, anybody listening, before you agree to do anything for anybody, you have to ask, can I do this without becoming resentful? Like, do I have the bandwidth to do this with an open heart? And then the second thing is, do I even want to do it? How about that? Do I even want to? And so much of the time, if someone else, especially when I was an active HFC, if someone else wanted me to do it, I felt like I should somehow make it happen because they wanted me to do it. And it is so important that we ask ourselves, do I want to? Because you don't need to write a dissertation on your no. Sometimes you just don't want to. Maybe you just don't like it. If people ask me to we're going to go to this outside concert. I'm like, everything I hate. sun, bugs, people talking while music is playing. Ugh, no thank you. Now, should my friend be offended? What did you create, the outdoor concert? No. I just go, not my thing. I hope you guys have a great time. And I think we have to protect our bandwidth and our most tender hearts from doing all of this stuff that we don't want to do, because it really does. It is a one-way ticket to Bitterland.
We were talking a little bit before we recorded about some recovery practices. And I've talked about this before, but when I first got sober and I did an inventory and I looked at my resentments, a lot of them were because I was not assertive. And so that caused me to harbor this bitterness and resentment. And I was told, like, always, if it's something with somebody else, always tell somebody, give them an opportunity to change. And then if that still continues, then, you can explore this a little bit more. But so many things, even like relationships. I stayed in relationships I was miserable in for too long. And
such an HFC move, by the way. We stay like 4 years longer than we should, because we're like, maybe he's going to change, or I'm kind of torn, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And they're not a bad person. Mm-hmm. Listen, you can break up with someone even if they're not a bad person, if you're not in love with them.
Yeah.
Because
put
how
them back
you
on
feel
a shelf for someone else to enjoy. That's what someone told me last year.
Oh, it's so true though.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Nobody wants to be in like a pity relationship with you, because you're like, I feel sorry for them. That's nobody's dream to be in that kind of a relationship,
Yeah. So what are the opposite practices of some of these high functioning codependency habits, I guess? Like, so what is the opposite? You're talking about saying no instead of saying yes to something. But how does this show up, and how can we like counteract that in our own lives?
So let's look at the auto advice giving piece. So we talked about that. What can you do instead? Well, you can realize that you are not responsible for what other people do, for real. You got to really get, what is your responsibility? What is your side of the street? What is someone else's side of the street? That's a beginning. So instead of auto advice giving, the first thing you're going to say when anybody comes to you with any problem is, before we even get into it, what do you think you should do? And then just stop talking and let them talk. You know, in this world of ours of self-help, at least half of yours is self-help, where people are like, I'm holding space for you. You know what? Nobody even knows what it means. Do you know what it means if you're in recovery from being an HFC? What it really means to hold space for someone is that I will be with you in the foxhole of your painful dark night of the soul without trying to fix you, without telling you what to do to make myself feel better. Instead of telling you what to do, I'll say, how can I best support you right now? Is there anything I could do that would help? I'm here to listen. We can talk. We can not talk. And it's the same thing with the auto advice giving. Learn to ask expansive questions, even with children, right? It's not about telling them what to do.
Motivational interviewing.
Yeah, exactly. Expansive questions.
Yeah.
What do you think you should do? Well, I don't know. Well, if you did know, what would it be? And then what happened? And then what do you think would happen? And then what would happen? Like, there's a way that we can help people we love get to their own answers, because here's the deep down truth. Even when we think we know what people should be doing, the truth is we don't. I tell a story in the book about one of my sisters who was in an abusive relationship, literally living in the woods without running water and no electricity, with an abusive guy who was doing crack, and she was an alcoholic. Sounds amazing. It's like an HFC's fucking nightmare, where every day it was like a 5-alarm fire of like, how am I getting her out of there? I remember going to my therapist and bawling my face off for like the 5th week in a row or whatever it was. And I was like, what am I going to do? I've done everything. And she was like, Terri, let me ask you this. What makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn and how she needs to learn it in this lifetime? And I was like, I don't know. I think we can agree it's not with a crackhead in the middle of the woods with no running water. And she said, no, I can't agree. You know why? Because I'm not God, and neither are you. But do you know why you're so distraught about this? And I was like, obviously not. Clue me in. And she said, because you've worked hard to create a harmonious life, and your sister's dumpster fire is messing with your peace. And you want to fix her so that you fix your own pain in the process, which was really hard to hear. Because, when we're hyper helpers, we love to think, I just am like that. I'm just a lover like that. I'm just Mother Teresa.
Like glorify it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we really do, there's like a whole savior complex that can go with that. But I had to admit that my compulsion to quote unquote save my sister was more about me than I would have liked to have think that it was in the past. So I said, well, what do I do? Because I didn't know I had a choice. I thought I was doing the only thing I knew how to do, which is just literally never give up. Just keep trying until you can manipulate her to get out of there. And she said, you need boundaries. And I was in my 20s at the time. And that was the beginning. And I just was able to say to my sister, hey, I cannot talk to you about this guy. It's so painful and disruptive to my life. And I was just newly married, inherited. I became a bonus mom to 3 acting out teenage sons. I just became a therapist from being a talent agent. Like, my life was massively busy and crazy and happy. And so I had all this guilt around that too. And my sister understood. She was amazing. And I was like, and I love you. And if you ever want to get out, I will always, always, always be your person. Less than 9 months later, she called me. She was like, are you still my person? I was like, getting in my car, picked her up. She got sober. She went back to school. She left that idiot. She's never been in another abusive relationship. And this was decades ago now at this point. And the most important part of that whole entire story is that instead of me, her youngest sister, being the hero of that story, she got to be the hero of her own story. And so her sobriety stuck because it wasn't me manipulating her and tricking her and doing whatever. And when we are auto advice giving and saving people, what we're really doing, and this was super painful for me to deal with, is we are centering ourselves in the middle of their situation as the solution, because it's so hard to hang with someone's pain. And yet real love and the real flex is being with someone in the foxhole while they're in pain and not fixing them.
And you're depriving them of their solution, potentially. I went through this with a friend who was engaged to not the right person. Mm-hmm. And
just say it politely.
Yes. And I don't think she listens to my podcast, so I don't think I have to worry too much. But it was really hard for myself and some other friends. And instead of inserting ourselves, we trusted that she's smart. She's also sober. She has a big support network. She has a lot of resources. She has emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. And we were just like, she will get there on her own. And we didn't want to insert ourselves because, similar to somebody who's an addict or an alcoholic, you try to come between that thing and you're persona non grata. And conversely, exactly what you're saying, you can let somebody know that you're there if and when they want to talk about it, if and when they want to get help. And then when they're in that spot, they remember that. Like, that seed is planted. And it's so powerful, but it's so hard.
So did she leave him?
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah.
Another success story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, thank God. I was really grateful that we didn't really have to get involved. And
then she didn't resent you, because what happens is when you do get try to get between, and especially really take your time. If somebody breaks up too, give it a minute before you're like, I always hated that person. Because like 2 days later they get back and they're like,
I was gonna say, I
remember what
you're
you
like,
said.
yeah, he's an asshole, and then they don't break up with him, and you've always said that now. So
there was a reel going around with a guy on speakerphone with his girlfriend. They had just gotten engaged, and he was like calling his best friends. He was like, guys, Jenny's no longer my girlfriend. And the friend on the other end is like, I always hated that skank or whatever. And he was like, she's my fiance now.
And you're on speakerphone.
Nightmare.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think that's like best practice. Is like, just don't tell somebody how you feel about their significant other, because it can change. I was in a relationship like that when it was off and on forever. And of course, the first thing that you want to do if you're going through a rough patch or you break up or whatever is you want to go to your friends and vent about it. And it is nice to get that validation sometimes when they're like, yeah.
Then you go back
then we get
and
back
there's all the
together
shame.
and I'm like, well, I'm the asshole. Yeah. So then I felt a lot of shame with that.
I feel like there's a way to do it though. If I ever really need to say something about someone in their relationship, I'll say, hey, I've noticed something. Can I share it with you? And if they say yeah, I'll say, when you're with Bob, I don't know, I feel like you act differently. Are you okay? It just feels like you're walking on eggshells in a way that's weird or something, rather than, I don't make it about Bob. I make it about something I noticed about my friend, if that's the truth. And maybe she'll be open, maybe she won't, but at least I'll know I said something.
That's a really good way to do that. And I have some friends in my life now that are so good about that. They're like, do you want to know how I see it? Like that kind of thing. Like very. I wanted to talk to you. You talk in your book about how codependents and narcissists attract. And I thought that was very interesting. So let's first define like a real narcissist, because you also have like these columns where it's like it can be this, but then also this. And I think we're so quick nowadays to be like, he's a narcissist. I had Dr. Sarah Kubrick, the millennial therapist, on the podcast today. It came out and she was like, sometimes they're not a narcissist, they're just an asshole. So I would love to talk about that, because I'm sure that's something that people can relate to as well. If they're like, why do I keep ending up in, this relationship with this specific type of person?
Yes. Well, let's look at narcissists. Right? So narcissists are people who are essentially, everything is focused on them, and that's the way they want it. Now, if they have narcissistic personality disorder, that's different than having narcissistic tendencies. Narcissistic personality disorder, one of the most important distinguishing factors is that you do not have the ability to have compassion for other people. You don't have empathy for others, like you actually can't. It's not the way that you're wired. So, and the pain that narcissists cause others. A lot of narcissists depends. There's different types of narcissism. There's a whole bunch of different ways it can come out. More covert, more overt, right? So we think about narcissists and we think of someone who's like the life of the party, is someone who's very charming and good looking and, seducing people left and right with all their charm, right? That's one type. But also bragging, also exaggerating their accomplishments, also telling you all the famous people they know, blah, 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 right? So that's what we think of with a narcissist. With a covert narc, they present more insecure, but they still have the exact capacity to torture people in their lives that an overt one does. They're just harder, even more insidious, because they're harder to put your finger on, where they come off as a little more insecure, but they definitely feel superior to others, and they will, in their own quiet way, make your life a living hell. Same thing. So why is there attraction between high-functioning codependents or codependents and narcissists? Well, the narcissist is like, hey, man, it's all about me. And the HFC is like, hey, man, it's all about you. Great. I can't wait to please you. I can't wait to do everything. Because if you are outwardly focused as a codependent, right, we learned to focus on other people and how they feel and what they need and what they want, right? We get really good at that. So you can see how this would be like a hand in glove, right? Now, as I like to say, it's a match made in heaven until all hell breaks loose, because it will. It's literally just a matter of time, because it'll always, and the cycle of abuse is an actual cycle where you have the love bombing phase, where of course, it's everything is amazing, you're amazing, sex is amazing, they can't wait to whisk you away to Paris or whatever it is, they're giving you gifts. They're doing all this future pacing where they're like, next summer, I want to go to Europe, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh my God, we're going to be together next summer. All these ways that they have of like luring you into their web is the way that I view it. And then once you're in, and people know, the moment it turns, the first douchey comment, the first comment that's like, oh, are you actually going to wear those pants to the party? You look kind of chubby in them. And you're like, oh my God, what just happened? And that's the beginning, right? So now the love bombing phase has ended. Now we're moving into the phase where you keep trying to get back in their good graces. It's the back and forth, the walking on eggshells, the never knowing what's going to set them off type of thing. And then usually it'll get to the actual end where either they'll cheat on you, they'll discard you in some way, they'll break up with you, and then eventually try to hoover you back, usually. But there's a cycle that happens. And the cycle can happen quickly or can happen over years and months, right? So there's lots of different ways that this disordered relational pattern can show up. But what I do in the book, and what I think is really important, is that we've got to be aware, especially if you are a codependent, especially if you're an empath, right? You've got to be aware. Don't just listen to what someone says. You have to be aware of their behavior. What are they actually doing? Are they following through? They hurt your feelings. They say they're sorry, but does their behavior change? And if the answer is no, is they're not sorry. They're just going to keep going. They're just placating you. So I think that any chance you have, if you're clear that you're in a relationship with a narcissist, it is literally an eternal lifetime of hell. Like that's what it is. And what's sad is that it's not two-dimensional, because we have actual relationships with narcissists, even if they don't have the capacity to have compassion. it feels like love, right? It can be great. Narcissists, or especially if you have any friends that you know, or if you yourself were raised by a narcissistic parent, it's like your friends are all like, oh my God, your mother is so cool. Like, you're so lucky. You're like, my mother, the person who wore white to my wedding, great. Like, never can have it be about you. But that can prime us. Having an adult in your life growing up who's a narcissist can make you very vulnerable to getting involved with one, but also just being a codependent makes you vulnerable to get involved with one, because we're the ultimate, in a way, people pleasers. And if you're an HFC, you're also so capable. The irony with high functioning codependency is that the more capable you are, the less codependency looks like codependency, but it's still fucking codependency. And so we still are suffering in the same way. So I feel like if someone is involved with a narcissist, you've got to be very aware of their manipulation tactics and be honest with yourself, and don't let them isolate you from the people in your life, because they're definitely going to try if they haven't already.
I always think it's so interesting that we subconsciously seek out the same dynamics that we had as children. I always thought it would be the opposite. You would seek out something that's going to resolve that trauma or whatever it was, be the opposite. And yet it's so innate in us, right? To just repeat these behaviors, these cycles.
But Arielle, what you said is true, because here's the thing. I call them repeating relationship realities, right? Like, we just find ourselves in the same thing. But what's happening, the way I see it, is that unconsciously, the little kid in us is looking for a do-over. We're like, this time it's going to be different. This time I'm going to be good enough, or I'm going to be whatever. Without intervention, therapeutic intervention, or something else that gives you the skills to make it different, it likely won't be different. So there's something that we can give listeners, if they want, that where if you find yourself in these repeated situations that you're like, how the hell am I back here? You're going to ask yourself, I call them the 3 cues for clarity. They're in the book, where the first one is, think about that person. Who does this person remind me of? Number 2, where have I felt like this before? Number 3, why or how is this behavioral dynamic, the way I'm interacting, like seeking the approval of this person who's very withholding, let's just say, how is that familiar? And I guarantee you will be able to be like, oh my God, that's just like the first coach that I had, or it's just like my father, or just like my mother. And why does this matter? Because therapeutically, we can only talk things out or act things out. So when we start to recognize, oh, holy crap, I'm acting out this behavior that I saw in childhood, you can actually stop acting it out. You can be like, I'm not my mother. My partner's not my father. Like, I don't need to do it this way. It can be different. But we have to get that information from what I call the basement, right? The unconscious mind, and bring it up to the main part of the house.
Your book is amazing. And there's so many, I love the stories. I love the practical tips. I love the loving reminders. I don't want people to be overwhelmed by the subject matter, because it's such a easy read, easy applicable read. So I hope everybody listening goes out and gets that. Tell everyone where they can find you and find your book and everything.
Go to hfcbook.com and you can get all the bonuses. And I also have a gift for your audience, whoever, these young folks who are identifying as HFC. If you need a starter kit, you can go to terricole.com/HFC. And I've given you something that you can watch. I've given you 2 meditations, just kind of a starter kit that will be helpful for you on the beginning of this journey of getting into recovery. And what's interesting, you and I have talked about recovery, but that's what this is, right? There's no curing HFC. But you can get into recovery, just like you can with any other kind of compulsive, addictive behavior. And your whole life will change when you do. What you want is on the other side of this, which is more joy, more satisfaction, more expansion, more relaxation, more inner peace. That's what's waiting for you on the other side of recovery from HFC.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.